All right, who's starting? Maddie.
Oh my gosh. All right. Hi, everyone. So excited to have everyone here today. And for those of you who are watching after the fact, welcome to our longevity webinar. My name is Maddie Cunningham. I'm one of the co-founders of Rev Health. I am a licensed acupuncturist and herbalist, functional medicine provider, and certified hypnotist. And I am really excited to talk about specifically some of the more traditional Chinese medicine aspects of longevity and functional medicine aspects today. So I'm really excited to be here.
I mean, I guess I'll go next, then we'll have Skylar. I can see it's like clockwise here. I am the other co-founder for Rev Health, and it's nice to meet everyone. Well, so part of my journey is I've been an entrepreneur for a really long time, and I was like 25 years. My last consultancy was teaching executives at Fortune 10s how to have life purpose and finding their why, which is directly linked to longevity, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But then on a personal note, I was able to reverse my biological age by 15 years. It went up a little bit after we started Rev, so we'll talk about why that happened too. But on a cellular level, I'm tracking at least 10, if not 16, up to 16 years younger than but my chronological age. And so it is very possible for people to do that. So we'll talk about that a bit. And then I'll let Skylar.
Yeah. Yes, Skylar here, another team member with Rev Health. I'm the registered dietitian. And yeah, I'm really excited to talk about longevity tonight. Nutrition absolutely plays a large role in health span and lifespan and longevity. So hopefully we can all learn something new tonight. So yeah.
Very exciting. And then Mitch, who's sitting in a sauna.
Yeah, my name is Mitch. I am Maddie's brother. I am the founder of a company called Cold Plunge Guys. We the our name is funny. We sell more saunas than cold plunges, and we're heavy into the distribution of wellness products at this point. But and a rebrand to boot. So our name will retire soon enough. But we've been in the creation, manufacturing, and distribution of wellness products for almost 2.5 years now, and I'm sitting in a sauna. It's actually getting really hot here. I might have to turn off there, but it is might as well be in the products if we're going to present and talk about all things sauna and cold plunge. So I'm excited to be here.
So many things. So it's nice. So welcome to everyone. It is recording. If you don't want to be on video, just you can turn it off or I can do it. Or if you, but otherwise just giving you a warning and a heads up on it. And then, but I'm so excited. I'm so excited to share my screen. We're going to figure out if I can do that.
You can
Can,
come in.
can we see my screen?
Yes, we can, Julie.
Are we good? Not to get all PowerPointy, but here's our panel. We just introduced ourselves so I can go. And I think the one thing I really wanted to start with is we've been asked so many times, what is the one thing for longevity? And you hear so often from different wellness experts, well, it's this thing or it's absolutely this. And it's just, it's not, first of all, it's not one thing and it's not one size fits all. So that's the reason there's a big panel and we're going to go through all of these different factors. But that said, we've been talking a lot about crawl, walk, run a lot on our Instagram lately and some of the social media. You do not have to do everything. Any step forward. What did you say, Maddie? Like any step forward is the best step forward or something. You said it?
Absolutely. Any step forward is the best step forward. Any progress is progress.
That's right. And so all of these I would, and another disclaimer would be, for some of the stuff that we're going to talk about, you're going to make sure that you either talk to your primary care doctor or, that you kind of, we're not going to have you being doing sprints or something max VO2 if you have not kind of gotten that checked out. Or if you're a member and we have your report and your physiology and we know, which is nice. So we're going to go into this. Oh, it's starting with Skylar. This is so great.
Great. Yeah, we're ready. Okay. So when we think about nutrition and longevity, there's really no singular diet that can be proved as, okay, this is the diet that's going to make humans live longer. Nutrition research is really complicated. There's so many confounding factors. It's really hard to prove such statements at that granular of a level. However, there are very common themes and trends that we see in the research that really lend itself to longevity. So really the best diets for longevity are those that emphasize plant-based foods, healthy fats, moderate protein and dairy intake, while minimizing things like processed meats, refined grains, added sugars, really like your packaged processed foods more. So this sounds a lot like, if you're a fan of Michael Pollan, his famous quote of eating whole foods, mostly plants. And there's a lot of truth behind this. If we do examine more of like the designated diets in the research and how they contribute to longevity, a few really do stand out. So those would be the Mediterranean diet and the Okinawan diet. So most of you have probably heard the Mediterranean diet. It's received very extensive media coverage, research coverage, and for good reason. It's a diet that's really rich in vegetables, legumes, whole grains. So really these foods that are super rich in fiber and anti-inflammatory antioxidants. It also supports a low to moderate fish and poultry intake, low consumption of red meat, so less of an emphasis on things like saturated fats and more of an emphasis on things like omega-3 fatty acids. And just regular inclusion of olive oil even is what Mediterranean diet's really well known for. And I'll be sharing more on some of these specific foods towards the end too. Like olive oil definitely is a big one. So just to kind of further encapsulate the research here, so there was a large meta-analysis done which encompassed data from over 12.8 million participants, so very extensive, very robust. And it indicated a protective association between adherence to the Mediterranean diet and reduced mortality or death from any cause. It's also linked to lower incidences of cardiovascular disease, coronary heart disease, things like heart attacks, cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, that would be like Alzheimer's, dementia, and even diabetes. And these are all diseases that we tend to see develop later in life, which absolutely affect our health span and our longevity. So we might be living for longer, but if we're living with something like Alzheimer's or dementia, that's not necessarily like a health span. And then the Okinawan diet, it's very similar to the Mediterranean diet in the types of foods that are included, but it also layers in this additional concept of low caloric intake and further emphasizes really high nutrient density at the same time. And so it's including foods, again, this is out of the Japanese region too. So it's including foods like sweet potatoes, green and yellow vegetables, soy-based foods, marine-based foods. And what this research shows us with the Okinawan diet's low calorie intake, coupled with this high nutrient density, is that it might mimic the effect of something called caloric restriction, which has also been extensively shown to extend lifespan and reduce age-related diseases in some populations. It also tends to include high intake of really potent spices like turmeric and ginger. So that can help reduce things like oxidative stress and inflammation, which exacerbate aging. And then moving on to things like caloric restriction and intermittent fasting, which they're not necessarily diets, but they're rather dietary strategies that have shown potential in promoting longevity, really by modulating certain nutrient sensing pathways and then thereby reducing our metabolic and inflammatory stress. So, caloric restriction, which is just reducing our overall energy intake, has been associated with reduced insulin resistance, dyslipidemia, so improving your cholesterol profile, and inflammation. And then similarly, intermittent fasting, it really induces this metabolic switch from glucose metabolism to fatty acid and ketone metabolism. So maybe entering a state of ketosis, which may help optimize things like our blood sugar regulation, our increased stress resistance, and again, reducing inflammation. I do want to point out with caloric restriction and intermittent fasting, a lot of the research is done on men. And some populations might actually experience adverse health effects from either caloric restricting or fasting. So going back to what Julie was saying at the beginning of the presentation, it's always best to work with a health professional or someone like myself as a registered dietitian before including some of these more restrictive dietary strategies as an intervention for yourself, because you don't want it to backfire and do the opposite.
Good to
And
have the labs.
yes, yeah, yeah, exactly.
Know your blood work before doing that.
Yeah, the biomarkers can tell us a lot. So, yeah, and then really a major message I want to send out with these dietary patterns and things like the Mediterranean diet is it's never too late to start including these positive and supportive dietary habits. If you're, in your 50s or 60s and you're like, well, I spent the last 50 years of my life eating highly processed, like start now. You can still make a pretty significant difference. And this was demonstrated by this 2022 modeling study by PLOS Medicine, where it showed that transitioning from a typical Western diet or SAD diet, like the standard American diet, which is highly processed, to a more optimized diet rich in whole grains, legumes, fish, fruits, whole foods in general, while reducing processed meats, it can significantly increase our lifespan. It actually showed that adopting such a diet from age 20 could increase life expectancy by over a decade for both men and women in the United States. So that's a lot. A decade's a long time. 10 years is a lot. So there's a lot of power in nutrition. And then I'm just going to get a little nerdy here for a second on these different superfoods. So we'll start with green tea. So there is extensive research, honestly, on all of these foods that I'm highlighting here: green tea, coffee, berries, and olive oil. And most of it is just showing a major reduction in all-cause mortality, meaning death, as well as mortality from specific causes like cardiovascular disease and especially cancer. When it comes to green tea, the dosage does matter a little bit. Most of the research that I was looking at, it's showing you need to be drinking multiple cups a day. One population or Japanese population cohort-based study found that consuming 5 or more cups of green tea per day had a significantly lower risk of all-cause mortality compared to those who consumed less than 1 cup per day. And then mechanistically, what's happening here? Why is green tea so good at extending lifespan? So there's certain polyphenols in green tea, particularly something that's called a catechin, which is a bioactive compound called EGCG, which stands for another really long word, that has been shown to enhance health span and lifespan, really by mitigating cellular senescence, which another big word here, that just means cellular aging. So really powerful, potent substance. If you like green tea, great. If you don't, and you're more of a coffee drinker, there's good news here too. Coffee has also been extensively researched, and it's been demonstrated that coffee consumption of 1 to 5 cups per day was associated with a lower risk of total mortality. A study out of Europe found that higher coffee consumption was associated with statistically significant lower all-cause mortality. So really, to summarize here, moderate coffee consumption, which is typically anywhere from 2 to 5 cups per day, it's consistently associated with longevity. There's pretty compelling research there. And again, what's going on here? Why is coffee so amazing at the biochemical level? So similar to green tea, certain phytochemicals in coffee help regulate proteins that are involved in cell protection, detoxifying and repairing enzymes, which really just helps mitigate all this stress and inflammation going on in the body. And then interestingly, the caffeine in coffee, which I didn't quite get into, is the caffeine in green tea also contributing to this? But it's been shown to promote expression of telomerase reverse transcriptase. I had to practice that one, which extends telomere length and delays this cellular aging process. So interesting that not only the compounds in coffee, but also the caffeine. And then berries, which we know are always really colorful, they're like deep in these blues and purples and reds. They just contain an exceptionally high content of these bioactive compounds, particularly something called anthocyanins, which really they just have a super potent antioxidant, anti-inflammatory effect on our body. So, for example, in blueberries, they contain high levels of these anthocyanins, so they really can help enhance our stress tolerance. They even can help activate autophagy, which is programmed cellular death, which is a good thing. So that can be very protective against cancer, especially. And then
Just
last, oh, go ahead.
doing that right now.
Oh, yes, yes.
That's it.
Yeah. And then lastly, as promised, olive oil. So what is so amazing about olive oil? It's primarily through its rich content of monounsaturated fatty acids, as well as the polyphenolic compounds that it contains. So olive oil in particular, it's rich in a fatty acid called oleic acid that influences cellular membrane fluidity. So our cells, we want them, especially the membranes, to be very fluid. We don't want them to be rigid. That's when things can kind of go awry. And so this oleic acid is very helpful at maintaining that fluidity in the cellular membrane. It also helps with receptor function, intracellular signaling, so how our cells crosstalk with each other, and even gene expression. And it also can activate something called sirtuin 1, which is a protein that promotes cellular longevity and just helps auto-regulate our inflammation and oxidative stress levels. So, in summary, that was a lot. Thank you for allowing me to nerd out about this, but I think it's really
Just
easy
got
to
a master's degree in I'm just kidding. Thanks
Oh,
for
yeah, like I think it's really easy to view food only on the macro level, like, okay, I have to eat proteins, fat, carbohydrates, but sometimes taking a deeper dive and acknowledging all the amazing vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, bioactive compounds, these superpowers of foods can make it even more enticing to regularly consume these types of whole foods in your diet.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you remember before I go here, I'm probably dating myself a little bit, but there used to be these TV commercials that would say you are what you eat.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And I mean, there's some truth to that for sure. Yeah.
Skylar, this is amazing. It's so important. And again, I'm gonna go straight over here to the saunas and longevity while Mitch is in the sauna. I just because there's a lot, we're gonna get through a lot, and then there's gonna be a Q&A, and I think we're probably gonna end up doing another longevity webinar at some point. But Mitch in the sauna.
What's up? Yeah, so this is I'm gonna take a hard turn on the doctors and medical professionals that are presenting on the details of how to control your health and talk about some of the products. I am a what I do is I create products, and so I know at a deep level like the decision making process that people go through to acquire some of the products that help them with these longevity goals. And so we threw down some of the most common reasons why people are seeking to invest in some of these wellness benefits or accessory items at their homes. That literally the top three being mental health, detox, and sleep. Like I think everyone's always looking for more energy and to feel better. And there's lots of good research around sauna. It's very well documented and studied. With traditional sauna, infrared is relatively new, but there is about its promotion of longevity, your ability to detox the body. There's now a cool study about its reduction in Alzheimer's, and there's more and more studies coming out about how beneficial sauna and bathing is just heat exposure in general is into your health. So I'll kind of let you guys do your own research and let the medical professionals talk about how that is going to benefit you. I think to give you some insight, like just into the products and like what people's general questions are when they approach getting one of, a device or something, investing into something for their home. The main questions we get are like around traditional or infrared. And I think it like very much depends on what your goals are and what your like resources are. I think most people don't know that if you wanted to invest in a sauna for your home, like you actually don't need all that much money. Like you can get an $1,800 infrared sauna that you can plug into a standard outlet, and that will do you great. Like, is that the sauna that you're gonna have forever? Like maybe, maybe not. But eventually you'll probably upgrade into something bigger, that gets a little bit hotter, or for whatever, something that you can use with friends down the road. But I think from an accessibility standpoint, like the barrier to entry is a lot lower than what most people think. Like you don't need to go spend tens of thousands of dollars in order to add like pretty easy heat exposure, like super beneficial heat exposure to your routine. And I think with infrared, like that is the accessibility point. So really where we see most people who are either like in an apartment setting, have an extra spare bedroom, or just limited space in general, and or are working with a like a kind of a get in the door budget, then infrared like is the best option. Like the traditional saunas are much more complicated. They require electricians to come install them. They get really hot, so you need like areas and places of your home or even outdoors to put them. And so when it comes to accessibility, I think like the infrared piece is fantastic. It is less studied. I think a lot of people also have this preconception that infrared is more beneficial than traditional sauna, and I'd like to like debunk that a little bit. Like there's far more studies done on traditional sauna, and specifically heat exposure at 170 degrees Fahrenheit or more than there is like during an infrared, just infrared studies in general. There are plenty of infrared companies that will quote studies of their own that will tell you like how great infrared is, and like not to discount like the how beneficial it is just to sweat and detox. I think like just general application of infrared rays through infrared panels and not being used as like localized red light technology that's been studied for like 20 years in dermatology. You can't just like take that studies and also say that it's useful for infrared. So like yes, where more things are going to be studied and like more studies are going to come out about infrared sauna. But I think leaning on the studies of traditional sauna and using heat exposure at 170 degrees Fahrenheit or more will help drive like the majority of like your research for what is like concrete, and your ability to create protocols with sauna. Um, for that reason, we lean pretty heavily on traditional saunas, and if people do have the budget to go out and create and put a traditional sauna in their home, typically we see them making that decision. And so and mostly because you're able to create a contrast therapy protocol with it. So like the vast majority of cold therapy studies are done in conjunction with sauna, and again at that like 170 degree Fahrenheit mark or more. So if you're in an infrared saunas, most of them get between 135, 150 degrees. I think this one's like 140 right now. It's pretty hot. But it's not going to get hot like quite enough to secure a lot of the studies that were done, and in terms of just contrast therapy in general. So just kind of wanted to like walk you through a part of like what the people who are thinking about investing into sauna in their home. It's like you go through the process of thinking like, well, what is like what am I capable of putting in my house? Is it going inside or outside? Is it like am I able to afford this and that? And that will kind of drive your decisions, because like sauna is a lifestyle like product where you're gonna have it, you're gonna enjoy it, you're gonna use it way more than you think, and then you're eventually gonna get another one. So like it's not necessarily like the forever purchase. Like you can invest in it in like for in like or thinking about, hey, the next 5 to 10 years, this is what I want to be using, and this is what I'm capable of getting right now. And then you kind of work your protocol based on that. So
Hey,
now
not to cut you off, Mitch, because we're on time. I'm gonna do it a little bit on time right now, but I
yeah, yeah.
think that I also do want to make sure that we're talking about that, because I love it, and I'm so glad you're here, and you're sitting in a sauna and you're literally extending your lifespan right now. But I want to just make sure that a lot of we had some questions that I'm going to hit you with right now of why is a sauna if you live in Arizona, you're getting it's 110 degrees, why can't you just go outside? Or people who are like, and not necessarily about, I guess the product or the difference, but like why saunas in general for the regulation versus like just standing outside in Arizona in August.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, heat exposure is well studied at like much higher temperatures than it will ever get out. So what if you really want to get the benefits of like the of heat exposure in general, then it does need to be a little hotter than what you'd get like just standing in the sun in Arizona. And then it's the exposure of that high heat for periods of time that actually don't have to be that crazy, but it's pretty well studied that when you're in 100 degrees, 70 degrees or more for 15 to 20 minutes, you're putting your body through stressors, and those stressors are what actually adds the benefit. Just walking down the street might be a little bit uncomfortable, but being uncomfortable in a sauna at that high of a temperature is part of of why you're getting the benefits of the sauna.
It's awesome. I mean, there's so many things. I know, Maddie, we can talk about all of these details, but just in general, I mean, the mental health for sure, the detoxification, which Maddie, as we know, with her most popular Instagram videos, said to be you in the sauna for a myriad of reasons.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and I'll get into a whole detoxification section at the end too. So we'll talk a lot about that.
And and again, I'm just trying to keep us on time. I feel like I'm a product manager. Like when I used to run a consultancy, I'm like, okay, let's keep it at an hour. But we're probably going to go a little over time. So Mitch, I know, because we also have this part too, which is the cold plunge again, and especially with the cellular death. But there's a way, there's a way to do it in a good way. Our body needs some stressors, as you were saying.
Yeah, and it's very limited exposure to cold plunge. I think like that will debunk like people going into ice water for, staying in for as long as they humanly can. Like it is 90 seconds in water at 58 degrees or below. So like when you which is incredibly cold. Like it's your body is 98 degrees. When you get into to water, it's 20 times more thermogenic than air. Your body is going to be flooding heat with the second you get into that water. So you don't need to be in very long. Yes. Will you be miserable? Yes. Does anyone like it? No. But the whole point is that you're putting your body through an amazing stress that will create these incredible benefits. And I think and it's like the cold plunge is one of those things that until you do it for the first time, you won't understand why anyone ever does it. But there's like immediate benefits to cold plunge, which is like alleviating your mood and then just creating natural endorphins into your brain that will like make you feel like you're on honestly this cold plunge high. And it's and then which is a very lasting energy. So we talked a little bit about Skylar talked a little bit about coffee and the benefits of coffee. Like energy is obviously one of those with coffee, but with coffee and like things like alcohol that drive endorphins up in the brain, they also fall really fast. Caffeine is it doesn't last very long. But the cold plunge energy is a natural high that lasts for many hours. So you get this energy that is like lasting over the period of time. So generally, when we get people who get interested in getting a cold plunge for their home, this was actually a huge product mistake that we made early on. People use it every morning because that is now their new cup of coffee because it's the most lasting energy that they've ever found. And we didn't build the products to make them everyday use products. So it was kind of like an oh shit moment when we were like, oh my gosh, like we have to make this way more like durable because now people are using it like every single day. I had no idea that was going to happen. So it's a huge learning moment for us. And it is very telling for the people that are investing it, trying in it, and then ended up using it as a daily routine item. So I think that will kind of speak to itself. And I know you're trying to keep moving, so I'll like
No, but I
leave it at that. But
I
it's
love that too. And again, it's like Seneca I mean, anybody who's like into, Seneca or the Stoics or anything, I mean, this is how he would start his day is like to throw himself in cold water. And so these are ancient practices that now people are starting to really get into again. And I love the fact that what did you say, 58 degrees? I mean, 58 degrees is cold. Like I was in San Francisco and the water was probably 60 and I felt like it was a lot. But I think people think it has to be so extreme and it doesn't. And I really like that.
Yeah, and just to add to there is also like just the way that Instagram makes it feel like the products seem like everyone's a professional athlete and everyone's using cold plunge for recovery. Like we're all normal people, and the vast majority of like hardworking normal people are using cold plunge for energy and not necessarily for recovery. Like it is really an energy product. It's just not marketed that way at all because the people that are like, that you see using it, these professional athletes that everyone hires as their influencers, are the ones that are like, oh yeah, I'm really sore all the time because I work out every day. It's like, well, that's not normal for like most people who are buying these things. 90% of our customers are just normal, hardworking people. And so, yeah, I'll kind of leave it at that. It's an underutilized energy tool.
Love it.
Very cool.
Okay, so I've heard, so this is, I'm going to go and do this one. So, strength training and longevity. So I have heard from many people, this is it. This is the number one thing. If you don't have this, it's not true. It's not true for everybody. It is definitely up there. Like if I were going to pick a top 4 for longevity, personally, it would be strength training, or it would be max VO2, which we're going to get to in a second. And I won't bore everybody with everything about it, but a lot of it's sort of this progressive load. Like it doesn't have to be huge weights, but it's just the ability to like be lifting something bigger than what you're normally doing on a day-to-day basis. I personally do not train with huge weights, but I do try to progressive load a couple times a week. So it might mean, I don't know, I'm like doing something at 8 pounds and then 10 and then 15. It doesn't have to be huge numbers again. So it's like these small things that are just the general thing about almost everything aside from the food is like, well, even with the food, a little bit of stressors sometimes. If it's intermittent fasting or it's a little bit of like cold plunge or sauna, you're stressing the body a little bit, but then allowing it to recover. So, and then resistance training, you want to make sure that, especially as you're getting older, you have good muscle mass. Lots of studies on it. People with more muscle mass, I mean, and it goes right into insulin sensitivity, lower levels of inflammation. But again, if you're doing a sauna, eating right and doing this, now you've got like a really nice, I don't know, like a triad of very good things that's for aging. So I don't know if I can pick to one thing that I think is the most important, but this is definitely up there. And because for time, I just want to make sure we have enough questions. And I will also send this. I will put it on YouTube. Okay, max VO2. This is my personal favorite, I would say. So what the heck is this? You've seen these like weird things. We actually have in our longevity protocol a way to test max VO2, but we're doing it through blood. So it's not like as perfect, if you will, as like actually getting on a treadmill and having your lung capacity. It's what is your maximum oxygen consumption? As we get older, it decreases. And it's not just about like whether or not you can breathe or you feel like, oh, there's no way I'm going to run to the bus because I'm going to be out of breath. It's literally more oxygenated blood, which is going through everything. It's going to affect your brain. It's going to affect, your fatigue. It's going to affect how well you sleep. And it's going to affect whether or not you can run to the bus. So this is really important. There was this time where it was like, if you were over 40 and you were a woman, people would say, you can't do high intensity training. Now it's time for yoga and hiking. It's one of the worst things that can happen. You should actually be stressing the body a little bit. If we are, again, like back to even with our protocols, like if your physiology is telling me or telling all of us that you're detoxing or you can't go up to that level, then we'll recommend moderate intensity training, or maybe we don't recommend that at all. But if you're generally healthy, I'm always going to recommend it to people. And Maddie and I did some sprint training. We've got a couple of videos on it this summer. And it does, some people can do 90 seconds really hard. And some can only do 20. So it's going to be based on your physiology. But it's short bursts of intense effort. And I'll give you an example of when people say, well, why does it only have to be like even 10 seconds or 20 seconds? Have you tried burpees? Do we know what these are? Where you're going down, you're doing a push-up, you're jumping up in the air, you keep doing it over and over again. Well, most people can only do 2 or 3 before they're tired. Or jump roping, something where it's intense, intense, intense. And or jumping jacks, you start thinking about that. How long can you hold it? Probably only a couple of minutes max. Maybe only 10 seconds, and that's okay. So what all that's doing is it's not only improving just your general cardiovascular health, but the amount of oxygen that you can take in. And there's no way I mean, you could have like a 3-hour session on just that, So I'm going to go to grip strength. We've all heard of this as well. It is actually a predictor of mortality. So it's not, it's not like directly related to longevity, but it's related to mortality, which arguably, if you're not alive, like that's going to affect your longevity. What is grip strength? Can you hang on to something? Can you hold something? Can you? And I mean, I actually even just asked my mom this the other, I was like, I can't open this jar. This is not good. Grip strength. It is a direct predictor of your mortality. Lots of studies on it. Weaker grip, and it goes back to muscle mass and functionality. So when we think about some of the stuff that happens as people are getting older, they don't even have the ability to, it's like there's no resistance training that's happening anymore, and it goes into everything. It's like it goes into delaying, just basically like speeding up how you're aging. We're gonna move on. Because I want to make time, because I keep looking at the time. Sorry, you guys. I'm like, I want to make sure that Maddie has her slides. I think I mean, because for me, it's like we're talking about what are the most important. It's all important, but the detoxification.
Yeah, it is all important. And as everyone knows, detoxification is sort of my bread and butter. And I'm going to be talking about environment and detoxification factors. So we'll talk about the physical, and then we're going to spend some time talking about the emotional side, which is joy and community and living a really purposeful life. But first, we'll start with the physical. Environmental pollutants are really important to examine in terms of longevity, and it's really important to examine these early if possible. So we hear a lot about these toxins in the wellness world. We hear about xenoestrogens. They are chemicals like BPA and phthalates and parabens that can really shift hormone metabolism in our body. We hear about obesogens, which can fall into the same category, that have a lot to do with insulin resistance, chemicals that make us gain weight. We hear about heavy metals, we hear about mold and all these things. And they seem kind of nefarious in a lot of ways. It's like, oh my gosh, what does that even mean? What does mercury toxicity mean? Because a lot of these things are really invisible and they don't affect us on a day-to-day basis. So we hear a lot of conversations in the wellness world about detoxing, but how can we actually make this make sense in the longevity conversation? Why is this important? So certain chemicals like those phthalates and those BPAs and a lot of the things that you see in personal care products, these xenoestrogens, they're going to shift the metabolism of estrogen specifically in your body. So why does this matter for longevity? A lot of cancers are estrogen sensitive. So when we start to get into more of a longevity and health prevention standpoint, we really want to be reducing things that are going to make an environment where cancer is more likely. So really getting rid of these xenoestrogens and these environmental pollutants. Now there are so many options available in the market that are BPA and phthalate free and paraben free. We also do environmental pollutant testing at Rev for people in our foundation protocol, or you can add that test on. Heavy metals, what is the deal with these? So heavy metals like mercury, aluminum, and lead, they accumulate in our tissues. And why this is so important to address, you can do anything later in life, but especially earlier, is that when we are older, we're dealing with organs like our liver and our kidneys that have now been through an entire lifetime's worth of use. So our liver is super resilient. It can do so much for us. Same with our kidneys, they're our body's water filter. But at the end of the day, if we can process out these toxins as we're exposed to them or earlier on in our life, so much easier on our organs while they have this sense of resiliency in them. So heavy metals, like for example, lead really accumulates in our bones. And as we age, as we know, as we start to get into these older years, we start to lose bone density. So, what does this mean? If we haven't processed these heavy metals and we get to be in our 80s or so, all of a sudden we're having more systemic toxicity come into circulation. Maybe that lead is coming out of your bone tissue. And then we see the increase of toxicity in organs that are now older. They can't handle it as much. We know at this point heavy metals are associated with things like Alzheimer's and dementia, and potentially propensating environments of cancer. So important to address these factors younger if possible. It's never too late, of course, but now is the perfect time to make sure that you're not hitting this later age and all of a sudden we're having more toxicity in the body than what maybe we had thought, and we could deal with it when we were younger. Also, things like chronic infections and mold. Again, we want to get these things out of our system and be testing for them pretty regularly so it doesn't affect our immune system, it doesn't affect our nervous system, and we're maintaining a younger age with a body who's super resilient.
And
And
oh, sorry, not to
no,
interrupt you.
no, go ahead, go Julie.
Because Skylar started talking a little bit about this too, like the epigenetics. So DNA methylation as we get older, I mean, if you think about it, even with your skin, it's like you have to exfoliate more because it's just your cells aren't turning over as often, right? So a lot of older women really understand what I just said. And our organs do the same thing. The cells aren't turning over. They're not I'm going to say this, but it's obviously the wrong term, but like they're not exfoliating, but it's called DNA methylation. And so these things are the environment detoxification are so critical for it. And even when we do our testing for the longevity testing, and it'll show DNA methylation, it's almost always linked to somebody who's just got inflammation and they've got toxins everywhere, right? So
Yeah.
you're seeing people even at like 25, 30, whose organs are actually acting as if they're 40 or 45 or 50. And then meantime, I'm 51 and my organs are behaving around 36. Why? So you can actually change how fast your organs are methylating. You can actually change how this is happening.
Yeah, you absolutely can. And it's so important to know, some people, we can on and off switch our genes. About a third of the population is really bad at detoxing.
Yeah.
Genetically, it's just something that if you have a lot of these things accumulated in your body, you have a propensity to do so potentially genetically, but to know that ahead of time so you can give your body the nutrients it needs to become an adequate detoxer, to then become an adequate methylator. That's invaluable information to be able to get these things out of your system really adequately. So especially testing early just to see, what's my baseline level of toxicity, so important. And just as Julie said, continue those methylation pathways and keep them going. And I'll just touch on this briefly. Like liver health is so important. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is the highest growing diagnosis currently going on right now, especially in children, which is just so sad. And just seeing a lot of stalled liver pathways, the liver is being really overburdened, especially by toxins and environmental pollutants. So how can we work on our liver health? And kidney health, so important. Again, our body's water filter. If we can maintain a body that's slightly more alkaline, which means that it's not a super acidic environment, things get really acidic when we have a lot of processed foods and a lot of toxicity. Can we give it lots of those fruits and vegetables like Skylar was talking about? Can we create a super healthy environment so the kidneys feel really well supported? And the kidneys also help us detox a lot of things like heavy metals, but only when that environment is alkaline. So we can create a lot of like a healthy environment for the body by reducing toxicity in that way.
Important.
Yes, and now we get to the other side of longevity, the emotional component, which is just so beautiful. So, optimism and joy. TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, which I'm a practitioner of, goes into a lot of this. So, joy is associated with the fire element. There are 5 elements in traditional Chinese medicine. And fire and joy are really what is called your shen in traditional Chinese medicine. And I think this is so beautiful. It's like the sparkle in your eyes. It's being able to look at someone and seeing their life vibrancy. And if they're just excited to be here, or if they're happy to be on this earth and they're loving their day to day. And you can see it, this when you're trained to look at it, and even when you're not, it feels very intuitive. Like you look at someone, you can just see this glow in their eyes, and that's their shen, which really keeps their life vibrancy up and running. And there are so many studies saying that having a more joyful life leads to increased life expectancy and longevity. We know this. Same with optimism. TCM, this has a lot to do with the water element. It's our go with the flow. Can we see that there's potential in every opportunity? Can we see that their life is happening for me, not to me? And Julie is so amazing at this, at teaching people how to find optimism and purpose in their day-to-day lives and creating a life worth living. So having this strong sense of purpose dramatically linked to increased life expectancy. It is going to extend your life. We know this too. And again, Julie is such an expert in guiding people through her purpose calls about how to find this for yourself to create a more meaningful life.
I know we did a mini one. And this one we all know it's all evidence-based, joy, resilience, optimism. But this one, most people have probably heard about the blue zones, but I'll let you go through it. Yeah.
Oh, yes. So the power of community. I mean, yes, the blue zones, these areas where people are out living the rest of the world and they're living into these decades and decades long. And, they have different diets, they all exercise, but what is the real commonality? And it's a sense of community. It's understanding that there are people around who love and see you, that they want to be there to support you, that you have people to have your back. It's just so important. And we think about the historical significance of tribes and gatherings. When there was anyone who was sick in a tribe, and this still happens today in tribal communities, that instead of more of the Western medical approach or the Western emotional approach is to sort of ostracize these people, more of this tribal approach is to come in community together, to understand that if one person in this tribe wasn't doing well, the rest of the community would be there to support them. So creating a sense of community absolutely extends your lifespan and your health span because you have these people surrounding you who are there to support you. And we know healthy relationships affect our nervous systems and our overall health so dramatically. We talk about this in all of our health reports, that your attachment style, a lot of people are familiar with this at this point, how your nervous system reacts to relationships around you. Can be the most supportive thing, or it can be a really damaging and draining thing. And we know cortisol and high stress ages us. So being able to be secure and grounded and stable in relationships is so important. Just the importance of touch, communicating physically with other people, whether that's romantic or platonic, so important to have that human interaction. I think there was a study showing like 10 hugs a day is what's appropriate for health, and we don't get anywhere close to that. So that is really important to just maintain the sense of human connection. And just this co-regulation of love and this really well-studied heart math philosophy is that when we are in what is called heart-brain coherence, when our thought process matches what is our heart's desire. And this isn't woo-woo stuff. This has been very well studied, that there is a field, an electromagnetic field that extends beyond our bodies. And when this feels really regulated, we can feel when other people feel really regulated. And you feel this when you're around someone who feels really grounded. You're like, oh, wow, what a breath of fresh air. But when you're around someone who's very unregulated, you're like, oh my gosh, I think I need a minute. And if we can be in these healthy, co-regulated relationships that really calm and ground our nervous system, that give us a sense of purpose, it can really extend our lifespan and keep our bodies in a really stable, healthy place.
This one study, and I'll just read it, and we'll put a link to it also on YouTube, but the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, which correlated, and now the U.S. Surgeon General says this, like loneliness is as harmful as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Community is linked to upwards of 10 years extension of lifespan. This is one of the longest studies that's been happening with aging and trying to correlate what is it. So I mean, this is evidence-based stuff, but so many people, it was like, oh, it has to, it's diet, it's not just, but it's like diet and exercise. But it's diet, exercise, your community, your environment, your detoxification. It's like whether or not you actually have the ability to change your gene expression and the DNA methylation, which is everything. So we've talked about this a lot, even at Rev, is it doesn't matter if you're technically physically really healthy. If you're miserable, it's going to catch up with you, right? If you're lonely and have a negativity bias. So it is important. It's all important. It's all linked. And that's it. You can tell too, when you start really looking into the longevity studies and watching these documentaries or the Blue Zone studies, when they're interviewing these people who are 110 years old, and they do, it's like they have the light behind their eyes. They're happy, they're surrounded by family, and like, and sometimes it's like they're surrounded by food that I wouldn't necessarily recommend, and we've all heard the studies of the people who are like, aren't necessarily that healthy, but living forever. And they just like have this great life. So there is a correlation there, and I think it's been dismissed for many, many years, and it's starting to come back, and I'm super excited about that. And then me and my my cortisol got to go down, Maddie, because my age started tracking upwards. And I am
We
not
are
okay
working
with
on it.
that. I'm not good with it. I want to be all natural, but I also do not want to like have my cells be my age.
Yes, we are working on it.
Work on it. And you can, and that's, I guess, the point. So I want to make sure there's some questions, and anybody who, I had some questions, a list, but anybody who's on, please feel free to either ask in the chat or I got a couple that I've got. Anyone?
Yeah, it is okay if there's not. I know we had some.
Well, yeah, we did have, okay, the NAD one. Maddie, I gotta throw that on you. I have 3 questions, but NAD, what is it? It's NAD, right? Somebody that we know is taking supplements from another company, and there have been some links that it's maybe not the greatest thing in the world to do.
Yeah, a lot of people are taking NAD plus right now as a supplement in order for longevity purposes, and or they're taking NNM. So NNM is a precursor to NAD plus, and there's a lot. The understanding is that it's going to promote like cellular turnover, and that isn't always a good thing. It depends on your health picture. So there are some recent studies linking that NAD plus or NNM can potentially, in the right environment, promote cancer cell growth because it's promoting cell growth in general. So you want to be really careful about, I mean, everyone knows this about me at this point. I won't even recommend like multivitamins to anyone at this. I need to understand what's really happening with you to really recommend a supplement. And I think supplements we think are kind of like toxins. It's like nefarious and just sort of like, oh, whatever. They are real things and they do real things. So we want to be careful, especially if you're planning on taking something that you're not 100% sure how it's reacting in your body, and you're like something people like NAD plus are taking for an extended period of time because they just think it's a longevity supplement. You want to be sure if you're planning on taking that for a while, it's not doing the opposite of what you want it to do. And too much of a good thing is often not a good thing. So just being really mindful.
I have one question on, okay, so this is actually interesting because Stacy Sims and Andrew Huberman, for what it's worth, just literally talked about it, which is, so trampoline, everyone's talking about, how jumping up or doing plyometrics, which is a way to increase bone strength as well as muscle mass, which is a great thing. And somebody said, I have a trampoline, does that count? And I'm going to go and say, not really, because the whole point of like jumping up and down and crashing on the ground, you don't want to be like an elephant on the ground. But the whole point of sort of jumping up and then getting down is that you would have that, resistance, like you're going to actually feel it. So a trampoline is, you're not going to have any resistance. You're just bouncing up in the air. So really a lot of fun, probably nice for cardio. Definitely also, I would not recommend it unless I know what's going on with you, right? Like I tend not to recommend specific exercise unless I really know what's happening with your body. But I guess that's like an unusual thing too. But in general, like trampolines are going to be fun, but they're not going to do that with the bone density. How would it? It's like,
Yeah, I think it's accomplishing two really different things. So if you want for bone density, no, there's none of that like resistance that you're receiving from like hitting a hard surface. For lymphatic support, sure, people love rebounding, like, and it can be a fun way to move your lymph, but two totally different goals. So if your goal is bone density, I'd look into another exercise.
yeah, for longevity specific. Well, I mean, lymphatic drainage. I mean, so no, you're right. It could be, but not for what they were looking for specifically. We should get some trampolines at the retreat. Okay. It could be kind of fun. I'm like, here I am thinking like going off tangent. And then there was another question, but I think we addressed it. But we also on the community board for our members will answer questions like this too. But it was like, which one's more important, max VO2 or grip strength? And really the reason that all 3 of them, including strength, is there for sort of your exercise portion is they're all equally important. I don't think I would put one over the other. And then, I mean, I guess the other question for diet is, Oh, it's loaded. I'm gonna have to throw it on Skylar for this one, but like, is it better to not eat meat? I will
Um,
refrain.
Yeah, this is a loaded question for sure. You know, is it better to not eat meat? So I look at everyone on an individual basis, similar to how Maddie was saying before recommending a multivitamin or something like that. We want to be able to understand the person as a whole, looking at, okay, what is their health history? Do they have a higher genetic predisposition to cardiovascular disease? Things like that. Okay, and then what is your overall dietary pattern? Are you eating enough fiber on a regular basis? Would adding in something like red meat, kind of be more supportive in terms of getting you bioavailable nutrients like vitamin A, zinc, versus going from a more plant-based perspective? It really just, there's so many different variables that go into this. And of course, even like ethics or cultural things such as that, like that, you have to take all of these things into consideration. Just it goes beyond as simple as, is meat bad for us or is meat good for us? And then to even further complicate it, the sourcing of meat matters a little bit here. So is it high quality, grass-fed, pasture-raised, or is it from a factory farmed cow that has a completely different nutrient profile to it? Grass-fed, grass-finished steak, especially if it's a leaner quality, actually boasts a pretty awesome fatty acid profile relative to something like a factory farmed cow. So lots of different considerations there. What I will say though is what the research points to is moderate intake or very limited intake of things like animal protein in general. I think a lot of times we tend to look at our plate a little bit disproportionately and maybe give too much leverage to the protein and the carbohydrates and maybe not enough leverage into the plants and the fiber-rich foods. So that's something I usually work through with people, is understanding like, okay, what are the different proportions of the food groups on our plates and how do we optimize that? So
I
that is
love
my, yeah.
And it's true because with the blue zones, I remember looking at it's like, well, obviously Japan, it's heavy on fish, but then Norway and Finland are not necessarily, especially during certain months, and those are some of the top countries for longevity. So you start looking at that, and it's like, well, what's the consistency? Everyone wants a quick fix. Everyone wants to just know the one thing to help you live a longer, better life, and it is never just one thing. That's the point. But you could do a little bit of any of the stuff that we just talked about tonight, and you will have a better quality of life. You will feel healthier. Anything that you're doing on anything in here is going to help you towards your health goals.
Absolutely.
Any more? Any more? I know we're at time. Look at that. See, there was a reason that I was acting like a project manager. It's 7:59.
Timed it perfectly.
All right. Well, you guys know who we are. I will upload this to, well, one, our community, our private community, of course, then the YouTube channel. We'll put some stuff on Instagram for anybody who is following us. And then I've got the QR code for Mitch's company, Cold Plunge Guys, which also does saunas. And then, but it's okay. It's kind of, it's like, it's catchy, right? So we like Cold Plunge Guys, but also a rebrand soon. And then and of course, revhealth.com, as you guys know. It's nice to have a Tuesday night sharing with you about how to live longer and better.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. And yeah, as always, let us know if you have any questions. We hope to see you soon.
Yes.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. I
Bye.
stopped sharing. All right. I'm going to end it. I'm going to end it.
Julie.
Yep. I know I'm ending it, Mom. But I'll talk to you soon.